Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Friday the 9th of August. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Cisco has warned of critical vulnerabilities in some of its common but end-of-life IP phones, small business IP phones. So basically the small business SPA 300 and SPA 500 series IP phones have got various vulnerabilities, three of which are worth having a little think about. The first one is CVE 2024-20450 with a CVSS score of 9.8. The other two are 2024-20452 and 20454, both with CVSS scores of 7.5. They're buffer overflow vulnerabilities, which could lead to an unauthenticated remote attacker being able to execute arbitrary commands on the underlying OS, but executing those commands with root privileges. And the exploit is carried out by sending specific, as they say in the article, specifically crafted HTTP requests to the device. So does this matter? Well, it kind of probably matters more than you would realize if you are using IP phones. I have in the past run environments where telephony was all Cisco stuff. It's not as easy as you think to secure Cisco IP telephony environments. The place I was working at, there was global critical financial infrastructure, which I can say years ago, they're probably not doing anything the same now anyway, but back in the day, all Cisco IP phones in that particular organisation. Also an organisation that took security more seriously than anywhere else. It cost them a bloody fortune, but they took security extremely seriously. And one of the things that was a part of the security principles was to restrict access to only those ports and protocols that should be open across particular VLANs. And they also were very into what was just considered, I think, in the day as you just segment your network for security reasons. And we'll now talk about, we've reinvented micro-segmentation. Yeah, that's because you had segmentation. You took it away. You realized that when things went wrong, they went wrong everywhere, and you're now segmenting it again. Anyway, getting Cisco's IP phones to work tied down to port and protocol and port through firewalls was surprisingly difficult. And in fact, we ended up actually teaching Cisco what ports needed to be open for their phones to communicate properly, because their documentation actually was incomplete in that space. So anyway, not the easiest things to secure. We discovered all sorts of funnies with them, such as you could, because the phone will act as a switch extraordinarily, so you can end up black holing traffic through a misconfigured handset. Okay, not great, and the network team and that sort of organisation were quite displeased to discover that was a possibility, let alone the fact that it could bring down an office. But there we are. Anyway, over the years, there have been various vulnerabilities in especially in the web management interface of phones. As with many things Cisco, if it isn't a router or possibly a switch, the quality of what they do, in my opinion, is variable. I've seen over the years various what would be really peripheral solutions from Cisco struggle a bit. I've gone to the trouble of implementing. So, they have this tendency to buy an otherwise very good solution for buy up the company, and then sort of fudge an integration to make it feel like it runs a bit of iOS, and then look at it and go, "Oh, we're not selling enough of this," and kill it off, which I have been caught out with in the past, having implemented some of the security toolings 10 or 15 years ago, only to find that having finally got everything working the way I wanted it, they end of life not just the devices, but the entire range, that entire solution, and moved to something that didn't do, the replacement didn't actually do the same job at all. So, anyway, Cisco have a highly complicated end of life stages as well. There's end of sale and end of this, that, and the other. End of end of sale, end of regular patching, end of this, end of that, end of software and engineering, as in we won't investigate errors anymore. But anyway, the ones that really matter, certainly from a security perspective, and from an ITIL supportability perspective as well. There are two that really mattered to me. One is the end of hardware support. So if you've bought an actual bit of tin from Cisco, if it blows up and they won't replace it, that one is majorly problematic. And the other one is end of security patching. So they will, if I remember rightly, there are situations where they will continue to patch security issues on otherwise. End of life. It's an interesting concept. This stuff is just dying. The Cisco stuff dies a prolonged and painful death. End of routine patches comes before the end of security patches. But once it's reached that point where you're no longer getting security patches on it, even if the hardware is still supportable, the device really shouldn't be in your environment. And the reason that this rather long-winded discussion to get us to this point is these particular phones are at the end of life. This particular article doesn't say which Cisco end of life it is. However, these are security issues. These vulnerabilities are, they're security vulnerabilities rather than just being service affecting things. And Cisco is saying that they will not be looking to fix any of these. So to put it into context, SPA 300's end of sale was February 2019, and end of support 3 years later in February 2022. So they are properly out of support. The SP500s reached the end of software support in June 2020, so they're 4 years out of date. And this is why it was worth spending some time thinking about how Cisco managed this stuff, because they're saying that Cisco is still covering SPA 500s until the end of May 2025 for holders of service contracts or special warranty terms. But the SPA 300s haven't been covered since end of February 24. What this article doesn't say is what they mean by that. I suspect what they mean is they'll replace the tin. They may, if you pay them, be willing to patch the vulnerabilities. And that's a good scam, isn't it? Microsoft's been guilty of this one over the years as well. So something comes to the end of life, you can pay for extended support on it. Okay, that's great. They'll continue at great expense. They'll continue to patch security issues for you. However, for each issue, they only need to code it once. And yet every organisation in the world that pays them an exorbitant amount of money for extended support gets the same patch. So what a money spinner, money for old rope. Anyway, so if you are using these Cisco phones, ask yourselves the questions, why? And make sure that you do have a plan in place to replace them with something that is in support. And also look back at your architectural principles or your security standards or principles, because in amongst that lot somewhere, there really should be a policy that all equipment and all software used, all technology used within your organization must be in support. As in, you must be able to get at least security patches. I'll let you IT people worry about all the rest of it, but from a cyber and infosec perspective, if you can't get security patches for it, it's not in support. So there should be a principle saying you don't run out of support stuff, because what do you do if you've got 10,000 of these phones rolled out around the world and they suddenly become vulnerable? How are you going to replace those quickly? Think a bit about that. Anyway, that was, I think, probably my rant for the day. The other couple of things that I'd like to just bring to your attention. One of them is if you're using 1Password on a Mac, patch it, because there's a vulnerability in the way that 1Password is implementing security around vaults. I mean, vaults in 1Password are kind of mini password managers inside the main framework. It's used because you may have work passwords that you want to keep separate from personal passwords, and you may have certain passwords that you want to share, and you shouldn't be sharing passwords, crying out loud. But it's not uncommon for things like Dropbox or Netflix, sharing with your mates or your family. You may want to have shared passwords kicking around. You shouldn't. Don't do it. But in case you do need to, they give you the ability to do that kind of stuff. Approximately 150,000 businesses use 1Password to protect credentials, and about 1 million, well, no, probably more, actually, millions of consumers as well. There's no breakdown into the percentages that are on Mac versus Windows versus mobile versus anything else. However, it is worth being aware of, as it is one of the more common password managers. So the CVE in question here is 2024 42219 with a CVSS score of 7.0. No evidence that it's been exploited yet. However, if you are running a version before 8.10.36, you are vulnerable to attackers stealing credentials from one vault, across vaults. So yeah, definitely patch if you're using that. Because the patches are out there, and this is one where you need to keep on top of it. I mean, if you go into the trouble of using a password manager, there is this old question around, is it better to have all your eggs in one basket, or to have, literally hundreds of baskets? I think the last time I looked at how many passwords I manage personally, it's about 500. So no, I don't really think that managing all of those as long, complex passwords manually is going to be feasible at all. So using a password manager once or another is unquestionably the right way to go. However, you do run the risk. The risk there is that if your password vault or your password manager is compromised, it does potentially give attackers access to all your passwords, one way or another. So use reputable password managers. Protect your password manager itself well. So long, complex passwords with 2FA to get into your password manager will perhaps be a sensible thing to do. And then keep it patched, because there's no point in doing all the rest of it okay, and then just being all this security being bypassed by a vulnerability in the app itself. And then finally from me today, I'm only mentioning this because it appears to be absolutely all over the cyber news this morning, but there's an 18-year-old bug dubbed as the 0.0.0.0 day, ha ha ha, which allows malicious websites to bypass security in Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and various other browsers in order to breach local networks. It is basically it's basically saying that your browser will attempt to connect to websites being hosted on 0.0.0.0. And in fairness, there has been there has been a significant uptick in the number of sites that appear to respond on 0.0.0.0. Historically, the number of sites has been relatively stable, and under 0.005% of page loads. As of August, end of July, August, apparently number of sites responding is now up to 0.015. So that's quite a significant increase. However, from the point of view of actual numbers of websites themselves, that's it still remains quite a small number. And there's no indication that all of those sites are malicious, but they might be. I'm going to put my hands up and say, despite having at least a reasonable grasp of how networking works, I'm not quite sure how this vulnerability actually is exploitable. But basically, it allows your browser to access in theory, allows your browser to access internal things via sending requests to 0.0.0.0 on a port of your choosing. So the best explanation I can say is the Security Affairs article that I've linked to this. There are various others. Pick your article, if you're interested in this. But as I say in this article, the experts discovered that it was possible to remotely execute arbitrary code on local Selenium grid instances by sending a crafted post request HTTP 0.0.0.0:4444/. So that's kind of how this works. It bypasses things like the cross-origin resource sharing controls that may be in place, and it also bypasses stuff like private network access controls within your browser. So it's a bit of an interesting one. I suspect that this doesn't deserve as much attention as it's getting in the cyber news at the moment, only because undoubtedly it is an exploitable real vulnerability, and probably is the sort of thing that up until now nation state adversaries have been busily using. It's been around for 18 years, this particular bug, so you can imagine the sorts of people who've been exploiting it, but it's going to get fixed by updating the browsers anyway. So the solution, keep patched. Well, that is all from me for today and for this week. Hope you've had a good week, and hope you have a good weekend as well. And